Right, welcome everybody to another podcast with Greg, Ben, and Sophie. We are all here ready to go. Ben's waving if you can see him. If you can't see him, you can just hear him. He is waving because he's very happy to be here.
I
So,
am.
Sophie, we're all happy to be here. Right, so today, some of the ideas we've been kind of throwing around and talking about is this idea of sort of erasing our presence in our conversations and our solution-focused conversations. So, I don't know what you guys, I mean, I've heard different things from different people over the years around leaving the lightest footprint, I think is another one of those phrases. And kind of almost, yeah, kind of making ourselves very minimal and almost non-existent in the interaction. So I don't know, I'm gonna kick it over to Sophie and just throw it over there to just, I don't know, have us talk us through kind of what you're thinking or questions, just kind of what's emerging for you around all this stuff.
Yeah, and I was going to say, oh, I'll catch it. And I think since you kicked it, that shows my kind of knowledge of sports. You kick it, I'll catch it. What kind of game? What are we doing here? I don't know. But I've always been really intrigued by this because, as you know, my kind of training has been in other kinds of therapy. So as a psychologist, we will have lots of different kind of therapies that we're trained in, and in none of the other kinds of therapy are we given this kind of really sort of quite explicit message, as you said about leaving the lightest footprint. And I remember hearing Chris Iverson say, it's not the relationship that's doing the work, it's the questions and the answers. Um, and because of my training, I kind of my gut was like, no, it is the relationship. And I sort of came to understand, I think, a bit more about what he was kind of communicating there, about how those questions are the questions that you ask in SF are more important than the questions that you ask in any other type of therapy because you are only asking questions.
Hmm.
So the balance the balance then falls heavier on the questions and rather than the relationship. I think that's sort of maybe what he was trying to say. But at the same time, I just don't think I agree with that. I don't think that I agree that in a conversation between two people, that it is useful to downplay the relationship that those
Hmm.
two people are having, that what is happening when two people talk to each other, and when one of those people is in a position of saying there's something that's not going well, something that I don't seem to be able to kind of think through or change on my own, and and I'd like this conversation to shift that. I don't feel I can do it on my own. I'm coming to you. And so I think already in that, you've got one person at very least asking for a relationship, for something to happen between two people. And perhaps you might say, well, then it then becomes the practitioner's job not to make too much of that, but to move on to kind of best hopes and useful questions, etc., without privileging the thing that happens between those two people. I don't know. What do you
Hmm.
guys think?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's as you were talking, it's made me think of a lot of different things. So I'll start with, I suppose, the starting bit, I suppose, is a good spot. When I think I'm going back to the training, because I think that's often one of those things in training when you're trying to teach something, it's really hard to teach that like connection, relationship building side of things. So it's almost, well, even as I'm saying that you can, I mean, there's ways to talk about it, isn't there? And kind of look at the way you interact with someone and everything else. And I do wonder if it's more of a we can really control our language and the questions, and that's like we want that to be the focal point. But I do agree with you. I think there's a way in which you can ask the questions. There's a way you do things around the questions you ask that helps to kind of show that you care and that you're interested. Um, and I suppose the thinking of the flip side, the the danger of it if it's too much about me and the relationship we develop, then does that take away from the change somebody else makes? You know what I mean? So it's almost like if you go too far the other way, it's then someone's going to think, oh, it has to be, it's all because of Sophie that these things have changed. And she's so great. And I want to keep seeing her because she'll keep helping me with things in my life. And yeah, it's also, it's a kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? And yet we know, I think you've talked about this, Sophie, that almost if we don't find a way to connect with people, they're, that then kind of shuts them down to thinking about the questions we ask. So there's a lot, I don't know, that's a bit rambled for me, but I suppose a lot of things to sort of bear in mind in the sense of we know it's useful to create that connection. There's a lot of questions, I think, for me around that. Um, but there is a way that it's important. It's something that needs attention. I don't know. That's a lot of rambling. Ben, talk some sense. Organize those thoughts and
Yeah, good luck with that. Me
yeah.
talking sense, we'll see. Um, yeah, it is an interesting topic, isn't it? Um, Obviously, we want to avoid codependency. I think a lot of most people would agree on that, and we want to avoid what Greg has just described, where people leave sessions thinking or feeling, I've only overcome this challenge because of Greg, because of Ben, because of Sophie, and we want them to go away with that sense of agency, of knowing that they've taken the lion's share of overcoming those challenges. So for that reason, I think it's worth thinking about. Probably the phrase, erasing our presence is too far. That would be my opinion. I don't, even if we wanted to, I don't think we can erase our presence if we're sat having a conversation with someone. Um, so I might be thinking about it more as reducing rather than erasing. And I'm also not sure about the word presence. Do I want to reduce or erase my presence? Probably not. I'd maybe think about it more as um, maybe something like importance or something like that, reducing my importance in the conversation. Um, yeah, because I think it's that power dynamic. I think is what's at the heart of this. It's about giving as much power as possible to the client rather than us holding that as the therapist. Um, and I think that's what's at the heart of those sort of phrases, like erasing our presence. I think there is a good message there, but maybe some of these phrases are taking it too far. And then you've got that interplay between, as Sophie started to describe, between the language and the questions and the relationship, and how do those things play out. The way that I've come to view it over time is that by focusing on the language and by focusing on the questions and doing things like listening carefully for the client's words and using the client's words in our questions, that will naturally like build rapport and build relationship with the person. If we're using their words back to them, that's going to make them feel heard. That's going to make them, feel like this person's paying attention to me. So I think those things are intertwined. Um, and I think it's this sort of pragmatic stance of focusing on the language and focusing on the questions is just a good way to go about it. Um, there is also, last thing I'll say on this, I think we do have to acknowledge that there is some evidence out there, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is some evidence out there that the therapist, the person can change and it doesn't actually affect outcomes. So, one of the organizations that I work for example, the therapist changes all the time. So, the first session, the third session, the third session, well, fourth session, etc., will be a different therapist, quite often each time. And it doesn't seem to affect the outcomes. Now, that doesn't mean that there's no relationship there. It means that there's like a new relationship each time a session is taking place with someone. But it is part of the conversation, and it does challenge that sense of, does it need to be the same person every time? Does that relationship need to continue on? Yeah. What do you think, Sophie? You got some thoughts, I'm sure.
I do. With what you were just referring to there,
Mhm.
do the clients know that the person will be changing, or is it a surprise to them?
They know that there's a chance that their therapist will be changing. Yeah, could
Yeah.
be the same person, could be different.
I think that's fascinating, and I think that probably is the SF is probably one of the few therapies where you can do that because
Mm,
you haven't had either an assessment process and then a kind of formulation of the difficulty and then building a relationship over time, kind of, sharing information like in CBT that requires a sort of certain sequential set of understanding. Once you've kind of got this, then you can get that which could probably only really be done by one person because that person would then remember what's been covered.
mm,
Whereas, of course, with SF, it can be 1+1+1+1+1, and you don't have to have been there at the first one to
mm,
have got there. So I find that fascinating, but I also think if you know that that's about kind of setting up an expectation that
mhm,
if you have an expectation that okay, this could the way this kind of a conversation works is I'm going to have someone sitting in front of me who's here to kind of be present and ask me useful questions and help me move on in whatever way I want to, then that's a different thing from saying, okay, this is my therapist now. This is the person I always come to. This is the person I have chosen. Um, so yeah, I find that really, really intriguing.
yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, it is intriguing, isn't it? I mean, I can speak to it from the therapist's perspective because I've been in that role many times. I think the vast majority of the time, it doesn't affect my work or the way that I approach the sessions. I'm approaching them with the same questions, same ideas, same intentions. Probably the thing that I maybe worry about most if I'm picking up, a session with someone who's had 5 sessions already with different people is whether I'm going to sort of go over old ground. That's one of the things I worry about. Am I asking questions about something that they've already been asked to describe 5 times already? That's probably the number one thing that goes through my mind as I'm doing those sessions. Um, and I suppose, what do we do? Trust goes back to our previous conversations. Trusting that the client will tell us if something's not helpful, but also practicing what you describe and what you practice so beautifully, Sophie, of doing that checking in and checking in on a direction. Is this helpful for you? Do you want me to ask about something else? All of that sort of stuff. Um, yeah, and there is if this is outside of what we're talking about, forgive me, but whilst I remember, I guess there's also that, one of the big differences between solution focus and other therapies is the advice giving side of things, isn't it? And the advice giving and the analyzing. And I think that also plays into the idea of reducing our importance, if I go back to my own words from earlier, and trying to avoid codependency. Um, it is amazing though the number of times when someone will come back to me and say, oh, I did that thing that you told me to do, and I'm like, I never told you to do anything, but that's how they've interpreted it, and that's how they've processed it. Um, yeah, but I think we could all agree that it's a good thing to avoid codependency, and there are qualities of solution focus that I think help with that. Um, but then on the other side, I do think using a phrase like erasing our presence is A, impossible, and B, going too far.
Question. So just about that research, has there been feedback from the participants about their experiences on what it's been like changing therapists and the outcomes they've sort of achieved?
Yeah, I mean, feedback is collected regularly after every session, actually. Um, yeah, feedback is collected, and it doesn't seem there hasn't really been any negative feedback about the changing of therapists, genuinely, which is maybe a bit surprising to me as well.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and just as we're talking about it now, I'm wondering whether on the flip side there are potential benefits to it as well. I'm just
Hmm.
thinking out loud of what might the benefits be of having the occasional changing of therapist. I mean, there's a question I'll throw out there. What might the benefits be?
Hmm.
Well, I mean, I certainly know because you both supervised me. I literally get the benefit of
Right.
of both. That's sort of why I'm not prepared to choose between the two of you, basically, because you both have different sets of knowledge, different kind of ways of approaching things. They're obviously still kind of, very much SF, but I get different things from our conversation, and I value all of the things I get. So I can really imagine that it would be fascinating to have that kind of experience of, doing a round of, okay, so this time I'm speaking to this person, now it's same type of therapy, the other. But also I can see, it makes me think, I remember when I used to work at the hospital in London for children
Yeah.
with paediatric conditions who needed psychological support. Sometimes there would be a kind of tabling kind of issue, and people would arrive for their session, and let's say the kind of psychologist either wasn't there, or there had been some sort of problem, or there'd been a run over of clinic, or whatever it had been. And I am now thinking, they were using the kind of system that we used before, the type of therapies that we used before, and the setup, the structural setup. It wouldn't have been possible to say, look, we do have a psychologist free, come and see them. And I can see actually now, if you were using SF, you could absolutely do that.
Hmm.
You could say, and you could probably actually still do that, even if no one else was using SF, to say, look,
Yeah.
you're here, I'm free, so that it's not a wasted trip. Let's have this conversation,
Yeah.
even if it's just a kind of placeholder for something else. Um, and that would be kind of structurally useful to have that kind of flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's the same reason that this organization I'm referring to has set up in that way. Ultimately, it's because of the flexibility it gives the structure of the organization.
Hmm.
In short, it allows them to respond to more clients more quickly.
Hmm. So, question that I want to throw out to you guys. We talked a lot, I think we always talk a lot about doing it sort of in a way that suits us as people, right? Like our personalities, our styles. So how how would you reconcile almost that idea of leaving the lightest footprint while still bringing the elements of you that make you you, if that makes sense? Because there's always that thing of if we're trying to give that light to someone else and kind of the credit and the impetus, while still having that connection. One of the questions always is, when people say, well, I need to do some relationship work first to like really connect with people. And it's like, well, how long's a piece of string? How do you know when you've got that? Like, how do you know? So I suppose there's a couple of questions there in the sense of if somebody said, well, yeah, but I'm a bit more like this in a session, or that's kind of my personality is maybe a bit more, I mean, it's not, but if I was more like really loud or outgoing and, an extrovert, which I'm not, but if I was, I'd want to bring that into the way I work probably. So how, I don't know, how would you say you guys do that? Like still bring in you and who you are and your style while still privileging the other person's, I don't know, knowledge and language and point of view.
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure I do that as well as I'd like to. So I think that there is, I think, Ben, what you said about the sort of not giving the information or giving, Greg, you said the advice. When we're not doing that, I think we are actively being light-footed. No, hang on, what was the phrase? We aren't putting us as experts. I think you should be doing this into it. So I think already, if you kind of step back from that, although I'd say with a caveat for that, sometimes people genuinely are asking you for something. And
Yeah.
I've also found it useful in my practice when people are saying, give me strategies. Then, after we've done a certain amount of like, what do those strategies look like for you? If it's a match for something that's in my head, then I might say, there we go, that you've just described this, and here's some information about this kind of thing. But to your question there, Greg, like how do you kind of go, how do you kind of bring yourself in at the same time as holding yourself back?
Mm.
Um, I think uh, I think that there's the sort of holding yourself back so that people can kind of give themselves credit. I think that I have a long way to go to make questions come out of my mouth that people can hear, that allow them to tap into their skills, their abilities, their things. For whatever, even I have kind of deep faith in the people that I'm there, and I think kind of what I'm there with. I think what a great and amazing person you are. For some reason, because I sort of like don't give myself a permission to say what a great and amazing person you are. My questions then, but I haven't found my really good way of authentically trying to help people kind of tap into that for themselves and walk away with a sense of like, yeah, I was able to do this because I have this. People do sort of answer, and it does sort of, it does seem to help and it does seem to be useful. But I certainly don't have a kind of um, a good way of indirectly through my questions communicating my faith in their ability to do things. So that I need to work on because I do have the faith. I mean, I don't know whether you guys have found that over time you just more, or maybe you're just more naturally able to do that kind of
Yeah, I don't
thing.
know.
But whether you found over time you're naturally asking questions which people sort of essentially compliment themselves,
Mm.
and in complimenting themselves and identifying their strengths, therefore credit themselves, not you.
Mm.
Do
Mm.
you have like ways that you feel kind of really comfortable and confident in asking those questions that then leads to something good for the client?
I'm gonna let Ben answer first.
Yeah, so tell me, tell me what to do.
My first thought is no, but fortunately that doesn't seem to matter. It still seems to work, even if it's fairly uh, sort of bumbled and um, yeah, even if the questions aren't perfectly formed. Um, I'm thinking of a like recent example. It's a client that I saw a few days ago who, near the end of the session, sort of said to me, "Look, you know me, we've been working together a while now. You know me, you know my life. um, some of my friends and peers have been saying that I'm destined for burnout, right, because of X, Y, and Z kind of life. Um, so what do you think? Yeah, you know me, you know my life. Am I at danger of burnout?" And it wasn't a very, slick answer or anything like that. Um, but I actually just love how solution focus gives you permission to just say, I don't know,
Mm.
I don't know. I just love like the kind of humility of that. There's just something that really attracts me to that. Just when people can be transparent, authentic, you have that humility and permission just to say, I'm not sure, I don't know. Um, and I literally said that. I said to them, it would be wrong of me to say whether X amount or Y amount is too much or too little for you, because everyone's difficult. Everyone's different, sorry. And everyone's difficult, everyone's different. And you know yourself and your life way better than I do. And then after bumbling through that, I then turned to some little questions around. Um, so what are the signs to you when you're uh, at risk of a danger of burnout? What do you notice about yourself when that might be the case? You describe some of those signs, okay? And if you start to notice some of those signs, how would you hope to respond to them? What would you want to do about it? How would you know that you were responding to that in a way that you're pleased with? And they began to describe like some of the self-care things they do, how much time on their own they would need to recharge their energy, recharge their batteries, that sort of thing. Um, so yeah, I'm just really drawn to that basic stance of like you probably know better than I do. And so I'm just going to ask you what you think. Yeah. It's not a very complicated answer, sorry, but that's what I love about it. Yeah.
I do love that kind of, as you say, the humility. And I asked a former client for some feedback recently, which they were
Mm.
happy for me to share. And they said like a version of like, Sophie, you're so great. And I know you're going to say it wasn't you doing the work. It was me. But it did actually make a difference, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. And so I raised them back saying like, you're right. I do think it was you. I don't think it was me. But I think that to it's okay for people to like working with you, for them
Mhm.
to feel like there is a relationship with you and that
Mm.
you have provided a space for a conversation where they have got things that they hadn't got from conversations with, friends or family or just thinking things through themselves. Not to kind of say that, I think that she probably would have done just as well with, all sorts of all sorts of other different types of therapies or different SF practitioners. Um, but that when I think about kind of experiences that I've had, um, that I feel grateful to the people that have helped me through them, and
Mm.
that's all right. That's kind of part of it. That yes, I have all sorts of stuff in me that has helped me do that. But actually, I feel grateful for the interaction that I've had with somebody. And that might be like, therapy, or it might be like a conversation that you have with a friend, or,
Mm.
whatever it is, that acknowledging that when we talk to each other and we talk through stuff and stuff changes, it's all right for it not to have been all of just us, like tapping into our own resources, that maybe we're social and our resources are social, and that we don't have to just get through problems on our own, and it is all right for our strength to lie in connecting with others who helps us see different perspectives as well. There we go. Off my
That's
soapbox
great.
now.
No, no, it's good.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to that whole point of like the expertise. We often talk about like the expertise and where that lies and with whom and all that sort of stuff. And it's kind of you know, absolutely we have some expertise, like acknowledge we have some skill in what we do in terms of how we talk with people and the skills we bring and the questions we ask. And at the same time, fully acknowledging the expertise and skills and abilities, the people we're talking with have and what they're able to do. And I think you're right, Sophie. I think there's nothing. I think it gets dangerous if we're like, well, yes, come and talk to me and I'll solve all of your problems. Like if we kind of, and I'll tell you exactly what you need to do. Like that's the bit we avoid as solution focused practitioners, isn't it? But I think it's almost, I think if it goes too far the other way, it's people kind of think, well, what am I doing then if I'm not needed and I'm not that important in this process? Like we play a part and it's just a part because that hour or 2 hours you might see someone and talk to them. Like the other person's out there living their life. So like you say, it's, you know, it's one thing to be like, oh, it's really nice talking to them and they've helped me think about this thing differently. And then our job is to highlight all the other things they've done afterwards while we're not around, isn't it? Because then that's the stuff they're doing day in, day out and highlighting their skills and expertise. But I don't know. I think in terms of, I think the earlier question was something around how do I do it in terms of like that genuine, asking those questions. And this is probably not the best answer, but I think I'm really like I don't know if this is undermining myself or whatever, but like I think I'm really simple-minded at times. I have this ability to just like be really simple and like singularly focused. So you put me in front of a TV and turn a film on, I'm stuck and I'm like engrossed and involved in everything. Even if it's like walking through a room and my kids are watching something, I'm like, oh, what's going on here? What's that about? And I can just like get sucked into it. And I think that's what happens when I talk with people. I think I'm just so like invested and sucked in, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like not in a let me just watch this and be entertained, but more of a let me just really hear what's going on here. And I think then it's almost a thing if I become so interested that I think naturally then the questions start to come out a bit more genuinely because it's just like it's less of a, oh, how did you do that? Because I know that's a question I need to ask you to, it's a strategy question to amplify your success, but it becomes much more of a genuine like, wow, that sounds really, really difficult. How on earth did you get through that time? Because you went through a lot then. So how did you get through that? So I think that like changes it for me, like my I don't know, investment in a way. I know, that's a dangerous thing as well, not to become too invested, but just that interest in what's going on and that what people are saying. I think that helps me. I don't know.
And I think in what you said there, like as you described it, you said, "Wow, how can I?" And I know that's like a famously kind of Insoo Kim Berg, kind of
It
like,
is very much an
"Wow,"
into thing.
and having kind of like watched her, you can see it's like congruent with how she is and the right word for her, and
Mm,
maybe like "Wow" is the right word for you as well. I don't think it's the right word for me
mm,
because I think I would come across as a bit kind of silly. But I think that my version of wow is, and the kind of way that I've moved towards sort of asking those kinds of questions is to kind of acknowledge that not everybody can do what you've done.
mm, mm,
Often that when somebody has kind of got through something or they've managed to make it happen or they've kind of gone to the brink and then they've headed somewhere else, that when I acknowledge to myself and then out loud that not everybody is in the process of doing that thing, and therefore there's something about you or something about you in that moment that shifted things, that allowed you to do something else, that then becomes my wow. My
mm,
version of wow is to kind of zoom out a bit and help that person see themselves as in the process of doing something that's probably unique to them, but that may not be a common response in the face of that particular challenge, or
yeah,
an easy response in the face of that challenge, perhaps.
yeah. And is that why, I mean, does that seem to work pretty well for you in terms of when you're asking the question?
I mean, it seems to work better than the other things I'm doing. Uh, I think I started out trying to sort of ask the question, but I think that I think I come across as like quite serious.
Mm,
I'm like frowning and focusing and really concentrating. And so after that, I'm like, how did you do that? It it just doesn't sound like an invitation to compliment yourself. It needs, and I think perhaps a lot of the things I say need sort of softening up so that it's less of a kind of like, you know, I think when you're single-minded, it's probably in a well, in a very sort of warm and enabling way. Whereas I think that my single-mindedness, the worry, can come across as like too, just too focused on something. And so that I need to kind of bring in a something to soften it so that I soften up and allow that person to see. Oh, I did do something. I guess I do have this quality that allowed me to do this thing.
mm, mm. And that makes me think of something. I'm sure we've heard it on trainings before in terms of feedback when we've like done sessions with people and even in our training that we attended, where it's that thing of when people say when they're in the session, the feedback is almost, I didn't even like pay attention to you, like in the nicest possible way. Like you didn't really stand out until you asked like a question that didn't make sense or, you know, took me this way when I was thinking that way or that sort of thing. So it is almost a thing of, I don't know, asking good questions that land really well and connect with people seem to make us sort of disappear. And it's almost like when we ask those questions that might be a little bit jarring. Somebody said yesterday in a training, they were, what did they say? They said that it was something like we were doing something rather than having a conversation. Like you were doing something, not necessarily doing something to me, but it was like that thing sounds like that when somebody says it to me. But when it's a genuine conversation and it flows more naturally, then like, you just kind of disappear. And I'm off thinking about these things in my own head, which I think is interesting when it comes to like, yeah, connecting with ourselves and how our style is, as well as sort of minimizing our not necessarily presence as such, as Ben said, but more just, yeah, handing that back over to someone else as opposed to having that focus be on us. I don't know.
I
Go on,
paused
Sophie.
to plug my laptop in because it seems to have been unplugged and I don't
Go
want
for
to
it.
untimely disappear.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Sorry, we have battery.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's it's an interesting discussion. I've just been enjoying sitting back and listening to you guys for a while. That's fun. Um, I think people can tell when you're being genuinely invested, genuinely curious, can't they?
Hmm.
And there is that strange thing, as Greg's just described, where in a weird way, when the conversation's really flowing and the language and the questions are landing, we do almost, actually disappear rather than stand out. Um, yeah, I wonder why that is. But I think the reality is that whenever we're in a conversation with someone, we are present, aren't we? Whether we
Hmm.
like it or not, and our personality and individuality is present. I was thinking, as Sophie, as you describing the way you'll kind of zoom out with clients. One of the examples from my work that I don't think anybody taught me, but there's just kind of sort of started happening is to say to people, "Oh, I'm asking about this, or I'm curious about this because I imagine that most people in that situation probably wouldn't respond with such patience, right? So how did you manage to respond with such patience?" It's just I don't know where that phrase has come from, but I use it all the
Hmm.
time now, and it seems to land with people. So um, yeah, it's that kind of comparing people to like the majority, out there. The majority probably wouldn't handle that as well. So how did you do? How did you do it? Yeah, and I think I just feel that the analogy of like treading lightly and carefully
Hmm.
is a better fit than erasing our presence. Um, you know, and to yeah, give the client the bulk of the lion's share of the focus and the agency, the expertise, and just to be very careful with what we bring. That's how I view it.
So if, I don't know, this feels like one of those like ending questions of a podcast, but like if you guys had to rewrite almost like an assumption or a phrase, I know you kind of
Mm.
that was a bit of a wordy one, Ben, so I'm not gonna let you get away with that. But if because so because often that's one of those things, like that's the ethos of the approach. How would you, if you had to summarize it or slim it down into like a one-liner, what would be a more accurate yet still capturing that sort of one-liner around the essence of that?
You're a hard taskmaster, Greg. I was thinking the same thing, but I was just going to put it out to the audience, to the listeners of the
Nah.
podcast.
Excuse me, like
What do you
this
guys
is
think?
usually the
Yeah.
sort of thing that people like, and this what one-liner? And we
Yeah.
set it up in advance, so we've got our sweet little one-liner ready. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
In typical SF fashion, Ben just says, I don't know. Let's ask everybody else. What do you think the
Let's
one-liner
ask
is?
other people. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
Look, I mean, the first word, if we take that erasing our presence as a starting point, um, we've all used alternative words to erasing.
Mm.
Greggy used minimizing. I used reducing earlier. I think someone said we're like a part of the process, but we're just a part of it. Um, so there's something about just tweaking that erasing word to we can't erase ourselves completely. However, we do want to in some way, reduce, minimize, recognize that we're a part of something bigger, which I think is that, humility part, isn't there? And then the other word is presence, which again, I think all three of us I feel like we're leaning towards an alternative for presence as well. Um, so yeah, hey, let's just see what people come up with. What would you use instead of erasing our presence? And maybe we can discuss them next time if people send in suggestions.
Absolutely. And they can be longer than one-liners as well, if you'd like. Brilliant. You guys happy to wrap things up there then? Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you all very much for joining us and for those listening in. And yeah, join us again for the next one, which hopefully will be coming soon. Cheers, everybody.
Our list of topics is getting longer and longer, isn't it?
It is. It is. Every
We had
time we,
about five today. We've got through
yeah.
one.
I
So
haven't even mentioned AI.
yeah,
That's another thing I wanted to talk about.
yeah,
Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there.
we
Keep
will.
listening. Keep listening. We'll keep talking.
Well,
Oh.
take
Um,
care, everyone.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
I
Bye.